All right. Gabriel got that for the day.
Good morning, everyone. So those of you who want to compete, I have won the 5K every year for 7 years straight. So again, that's a competition. But, I actually had the dog the day yesterday, and at the last second, I got called into something, and I'll get back to that in a bit. But that other day is about breaking a cycle, not about change. Now, the hardest thing to break a cycle is to understand that there is a cycle. It is present, it is there, and it's destroying our families, and it's destroying our bloodline. And a lot of us don't realize it because we normalize it. You see, I grew up in a family full of gang members. My grandpa's house was headquarters for the gang. My dad was a gang member. My uncles, my brother, my cousins, myself, all joined gangs. All of us were from the same gang, except for my dad. So about 8 years ago, actually October 11th of 2013, I had a son, right? And I'm gonna be honest, I was never a father before because of that cycle. And I didn't raise my kids. I chose my gang, I chose drugs, I chose prison over raising my children. And I had no intention of changing it either. When I see my son born, my phone was ringing. I did not want to be there. A lot of people were calling me, wanting to go kick it, wanting to go to the hood. And once my son was born, I was like, good, now I could leave. And for some reason, I walked back and I'm watching his stomach move up and down. And I was high on meth. So I thought he was making eye contact with me. And I was like, man, but he can't even see nothing, just clouds, because he was just a newborn baby. And it was that second I knew I wanted to change my life. And I was unaware of any kind of cycles that went on in my family, in my generations. And I came to Homeboy Industries, and I walked into these doors with my face full of tattoos, and I had my gang all over my face. I couldn't keep it out of my arm for the life of me. I could not keep it on my arm. And I walked in all hard, mad dogging everybody, trying to be all gangster. But then I felt dumb because I seen everyone walk around all happy and stuff. I'm like, man. And slowly, that was the first brick that fell. And I was like, man, I should be myself right here. And I began to take parenting classes. And I was, and I relapsed. And I went, when Homeboys sent me to a rehab. And there was this rehab, I really had to beat my whole life over. And I knew I wanted to change my life. I had no idea how. But Homeboy Industries had all the answers for me. You know, I came back, and I began to take parenting classes, anger management classes. Because the truth, I was an abuser. I was a violent abuser in all my relationships, and I didn't know where I came from. I thought it was normal because in the community I grew up in and a lot of our communities, domestic violence is just normal. We have normalized it. But as I mentioned, it is part of the generations of the cycles that we have allowed and participated in to build. Unless we decide to stop and say, I don't want a part of this no more, we will hand it down to our children. And I remember I was living in sober living homes because I didn't trust myself yet. And I would go see my son on weekends, and there was a lot of violence in that home where I would go visit him, a lot of drugs in that home, which was normalized. And I would go back to the sober living home. And this went on for years, because I didn't trust myself yet. I was going to college, I started taking, a lot of my classes would focus on child development, because I wanted to understand my son, what he was going through, and his different stages of his life. And then I started realizing that everything that he sees, he's learning. And that's where, like I mentioned before, the generations and the cycles continue. And I knew that I didn't want my son to grow up the way I grew up. And it took years for me to say, you know what, I'm ready. I don't got to live in a sober living home no more. And I went and lived with my brother for about a year. We had our own little apartment. And things didn't go right there. I still didn't use. And then I went to go, the biggest challenge I had to go back to my neighborhood. I went to go live with Robert Waters. I rented a room from Robert Waters. And right down the street, right up the street from the park. And I had to realize, I see my friends there all day, every day. All my friends that I grew up with, as well as their kids who are not from the hood, generational gang members. And I knew that, and I would still see my son on weekends, but it came to the point where I realized that he's observing my behaviors, and I'm the only father figure that he had. And so I played an important role of how he's going to see men, how he's going to conduct himself. But I could love him, and I could show him, and I could conversate with him, create a lot of dialogue, but he started to go home. And I knew that I had to get my son in. If I was going to make a change in this kid's life, I had to remove him from that home, and I had to raise him by myself. And so I got my own apartment, and I began the process. I began to do all the paperwork. My fiance, my wife, she helped me so much. I got an apartment. I would get him on weekends, but slowly I was taking legal action. And, you know, something happened in his home, and DCFS got involved. And I was in a perfect place where I had my own apartment, where I was able to take him, and he came with me. He came to live with me during the pandemic. And it happened one day. I was always my plan, but one day, like, boom, now he lives with me for good. Not for good yet, because there's still the investigation against whatever happened at his other house. 1 year later, yesterday, when I had to leave, when I left about a day, they called me to the court, and I was granted sole custody of my son. I share this with everybody, because the first day when I took my son, and I'm gonna tell you straight up, DCFS has been amazing to me. They have been so amazing. But the first worker that came to visit me, we talked, and she goes, I'm gonna tell you the truth. Before I came, I looked you up, and I came with the intention of removing your son from you. But I see everything that you've been doing in your life, and I know your son is in the right place. We all come to these doors to change. And it's up to all of us to stop and say, I'm done. I'm not going to hand this down to my kids. I'm not going to have my kids grow up the way I grew up. Thank you.